What's up, guys? Welcome back to Tidal Gardens. It has been a hot minute since we've done a building update, so I apologize for that up front. There have been quite a few projects that we've been doing here that are finally taking shape. Oftentimes when it comes to these types of updates, I feel like there's so many big things just around the corner that I just want to wait until those happen before we even start talking about them. But I think we're finally at the point where enough is different from the last time that we've done an update that we can share. So the first thing is elephant in the room. We have some more aquariums that have finally come in. So this is going to be our third system in the new building. We're calling this System C or Set C. It's made up of 5 aquariums. Each of these aquariums measures 10 feet by 4 feet wide. And they're in the ballpark of 22 inches tall. Each of these tanks is roughly 500 gallons. That puts this entire system volume with the sump and all that in the ballpark of 2,500 to 3,000 gallons, give or take. Now, I'm super excited about this system because it's going to be a very, very productive system. It's designed pretty much to be highly utilitarian, meaning that it's going to house the corals that are mostly for our sales and shipping. We've built a gigantic, and I mean a gigantic 40-foot shipping area behind these tanks here. One of the big problems that we ran into next door was there's very little room to actually do our shipping and packing. It was fine for when we had a lot lower shipping volume. Like a busy day back in the day would be something on the order of 5 to 10 packages a day. Pretty decent day. These days, it's entirely possible that we would have a 50 to 60 box day going out, and that's only because we couldn't physically do more than that. There's been a couple days, especially in and around like the bigger sale events for like our YouTube sale or something on Reef to Reef, things like that, where it's easily 100 some odd orders need to go out, and we would have to then break that up over a number of days. So hopefully with this new packing area, we will have a lot more capacity. Because we're in multiple buildings and there's quite a lot of square footage, I think as far as like just the square footage where we have aquariums and stuff like that, I mean, we're talking, you know, several thousand square feet. And when it comes time to pack, the guys have to do some serious walking around to all the different parts of this place. Some of the corals you grab from the greenhouse, some of it you grab from the farming area in the new building here. The idea with this new set of tanks is that a lot of the corals that are represented online for sale are going to be housed here. So it's right next to the shipping area. There's not going to be as much running around. So the tanks in the far back that you see with the blue lights, a lot of that stuff is focused on farming. The stuff in the greenhouse, again, focused on farming over there. And once we're ready to put that stuff available for sale, it'll make its way into these tanks. And that's the idea anyways. We'll see how that works in practice, but best laid plans, right? This isn't going to be the final location for these tanks, by the way. They're going to have to be scooched and poked and prodded just a little bit. What we have are some custom aquariums, right? They were made by Exotic Aquariums down in Miami. They were the same folks that did the aquariums for Worldwide Corals. So now we are on our third different custom tank manufacturer. The first 10 aquariums came from Felix at Reef Savvy. He also did some tanks for Living Reef Orlando. The second custom tank manufacturer was Derek Henry. He did the aquariums for Top Shelf Aquatics. And then now Exotic Aquariums, Worldwide Coral. So it's like I've done like the Orlando custom aquarium circuit, I guess. So how are they situated on these stands? I get a million questions about the stands. They are from Alufab That's an Ohio company. They do all the engineering and design work for us. I mean, I basically give them like a rough construct of what I'm looking for, and after having done, at this point, I guess dozens of aquariums, I can be very specific on what I'm looking for. But yeah, we come together on a design. They put together a CAD drawing and do all the fabrication stuff. It works out. On top of this, we have a layer of structural type 1 PVC, and then on top of that, we have a 4-pound foam layer. So this is closed cell foam, and this stuff is found from a company called The Foam Factory. You can get it in big rolls. It's expensive, so be mindful of that. I think that one roll of this, the last time that I purchased it, was roughly $700 or something like that. Most people, when they put together tanks like this, they use a layer of marine grade plywood, and on top of that they have something from like Home Depot or something like a foam layer. You always need to have some kind of like structural layer, and then you need to have kind of like the squish layer. And that squish layer is just in case like there's some like dirt or debris or something like that that would cause there to be a pressure point when you set the tank on it. You want it to absorb pretty much into that foam squish layer. Now, I went with this because even though marine grade plywood is supposed to be very, 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 very water resistant, I want to try to avoid as much wood as possible when it's so close to the water. So that's why we went with type 1 PVC, and you can get that in sheets, and the closed cell foam. The closed cell foam is more of an aesthetic thing. I just like the way that it looks more than like the pink or the blue stuff that you might find at Home Depot, that styrofoam. The other thing though is that the closed cell foam, it kind of grips a little bit more, and that kind of sabotages you a little bit when you set the tanks on, because it really wants to move. In the past, we just had to kind of like lift lower, lift lower, lift lower until we got everything the way that we wanted. It was kind of a pain. This time around, we big brained it and we spray glued the closed cell foam layer to the type 1 PVC. I didn't know how well that was gonna work. I've got a can of what we used, and it's this 3M spray glue. This is the 90, the high strength. Sure enough, once you give this a few hours to cure, that closed cell foam is not coming off. I've used this on a number of things in this entire build, and I'm just glad that it worked out, because again, once you are kind of like trying to make like adjustments and stuff like that, you don't want these layers separating much at all, because it's such a pain, because we need to align the aquarium to that foam and plastic layer. Then we need to align all of that down to the stand. The alignment process for tanks this heavy, I mean, these things are probably 1,000 pounds. You want to minimize as much of that as possible. As far as the aquarium itself, it has an overflow on the other end, and that overflow box has 4 holes in it. 3 of them are for like that triple bean animal type overflow design, where you are able to like stop down the main with a gate valve. Then you have like 2 emergencies of some sort. The 4th hole is what we're going to be using to bring up our return line from the sump. It'll go up and over the overflow box, and I like that up and over design because that allows us to also drill in like a safety siphon break. So if the return pump goes off, that safety will stop the back siphoning process. It's a pretty simple design. In the bottom of these tanks, we have 3 holes. They are designed for 1.5-inch bulkheads. The idea here is that we're going to be running a closed loop. In our other farming tanks, we have 4 holes, and we're running 2 different pumps. We have an Ecotech Vectra L2 in pairs. On this system though, goal is to have a single closed loop pump. It will be an Abyss A200. It'll have 1 intake and 2 outputs. Part of the reason why we didn't put more holes in, a lot of it came down to the spacing of the framework of the aluminum stand below. The other thing is we probably will be installing some kind of power head. We were trying to avoid that as much as possible, but for tanks like this, I think that it does work pretty well with power heads. I haven't decided exactly which ones to use, but I would like to have them be finely controllable, because the idea is I want to have 2 blowing from the overflow box area to the far end. Now again, this is 10 feet, so it's gonna have to be a pretty strong pump. The wish list pump would be one of the new Abyss AFC pumps, which are designed for tanks that are slightly larger than this. But if I run them in pairs, even if I'm only running them at relatively low power, let's say 50%, I could ramp one from 0 to 50. At the same time, ramp the other from 50 to 0, and then switch them back and forth, so you don't have a situation of the corals, especially like the LPS, getting like blown heavily to one side for 24 hours a day. I think this like slow ramp going one way, and then reversing course, and then reversing like very, very slowly. Maybe each cycle is 15, 20 minutes. I don't know. I'm just making up numbers at this point. But that's kind of like what I had in mind. Obviously, the downside to doing something like that with that particular pump is the insane price point that it's going to cost. People that buy Abyss, they know what they're looking for. Clearly, that's what I'm looking for. It's just like, ugh, you know, because it's not just that I need 2 for this tank. I need 2 for 5 more. So yeah, such is life, I guess, right? First world problems. But that's kind of like the flow design for these tanks. One random thing that I'm going to mention is that we're going with a different bulkhead than we've done in some of the past systems. In some of the systems, we have gone with kind of the inexpensive Schedule 80 bulk reef supply ones. And we've also gone with a more expensive Spears brand bulkhead. Now, those are all fine. They work. Little leaks here and there, sure, whatever, it's fine. But for these tanks, we went with Heyward. I would say that Heyward is kind of a premium brand, kind of like Spears. My original intention was to go with Spears, but there's like a major supply shortage when it comes to Spears bulkheads. So either they're completely unavailable, or they are triple their normal price. So something like this, I think in Spears would have been $70 something maybe. I forget exactly, but it was a whole bunch. And on top of that, we need 35 of these. That's kind of a problem, right? But I actually like these Heyward ones better, and I'll tell you why. They reverse thread, meaning that to tighten it, you turn it left. Now, why is that important? Because when we start to attach stuff on the inside and we thread those guys in order to untighten them for maintenance later, because you know stuff grows on your plumbing, and it's nice to be able to unscrew it, soak it in acid, screw it back in. But that unscrewing activity would then unscrew also this bottom part in a traditional bulkhead like we have in the rest of our systems. But these guys, since they kind of reverse thread, unscrewing something out of the top for maintenance makes this thing tighter, which is kind of nice, because what we did the other day was we had to go back through and retighten after about a year. I mean, it's been a year, but we had to go back through and retighten all of our existing bulkheads, because some of them absolutely started leaking after a while, because it's just that little bit of jostling, maybe a little bit of vibration from the pumps and whatever. Any number of things could kind of like get these things to loosen their grip a little bit. So just getting back in there and hand tightening them down helped a lot. But I think that just by the way that these things are designed, they might just kind of tighten themselves as time goes on, which I like. Also, check this out. We got some big ones too. This is a 4-inch bulkhead that's going to be going as the main drain for our sump. So all of these tanks are going to drain down from 1.5 inches for the different drains, all the way down to a 4-inch central. And this 4-inch central, so this is, by the way, going to be going on the sump. This 4-inch central drain is going to like loop around, and it's going to shoot behind this false wall that we, believe it or not, we actually thought of that. We actually thought of, okay, the sump is going to have to go on the other side of this bathroom. So we designed from day one a false wall that the plumbing can go behind to get to the sump on the other side. Anyway, not every day you see a 4-inch Heyward bulkhead. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the lighting that's going to go over these tanks. It's pretty much no secret that we like Ecotech Radions quite a bit. And this system is pretty much going to stay consistent with the majority of the lighting in the rest of the farm so that there's no weird weird light inconsistencies to like change the color of the coral right as we're about to take them and ship them out. Each of these aquariums is going to require about 10 XR30 Pros. We were deciding to go with the Pros because even though we like the blues just fine, when it comes to do like top-down photography and photography in general, and using so many of them, you get a very kind of blanket look, and that's kind of what I'm going for, a very even, keeled look. I plan to build some floating canopies above this tank. In the rest of the farm, we have a lot of the stuff just kind of hanging down in a very, very kind of skeletal look, and I like that look. But wire management became more of an obstacle than I would like. So I would like to build something similar to what we have out in the greenhouse, where it's its own floating canopy. We can incorporate the wire management into that and have a very simple couple of plug points that go into these outlets. Now, one thing that we did, which I'm very, very, very glad that we did recently, is we went through and actually did a full-blown electrical audit of this whole building. It was actually a funny story. I was trying to install a couple of smart switches so that I can turn the building lights on just from an app. I could put them on a schedule, things like that. And we could not find the damn breaker that the lights were on. We found every other thing except for these breakers. Now, you would think that, well, all these things should have been labeled beforehand, but the electrical has been like done and redone a number of times so far in the past 3 years. So a lot of the breakers have been like repurposed, certain things have been relocated, expanded upon, stuff happens, right? Stuff got replaced by double breakers and it got relocated. It's like a snake pit mess, which is insane for a new building construction, but here we are. Anyway, we could not trust the notes that are in the box. Knowing that, we were still going through and we started to label every single outlet that we knew of. And at the very end, we still couldn't find the stupid breaker that controlled just the lights. Now, we eventually did find it because there were 3 breakers that were listed for the septic system. And I didn't want to mess with that because it's like, if I flip this breaker, is that going to somehow mess up my septic? Because I cannot mess up my septic. That's highly unacceptable, right? It's like, what if the septic doesn't turn back on? That's a problem. But it turns out that one of those 3 was a mislabeled thing, and it in fact did control the lights. Long story short, we ended up doing an audit of this entire building. So pretty much every single outlet that you see in here has a breaker label. And then we also fixed the notes on the inside of the panel. It's pretty clear as to like where everything is now. Anyway, the nice thing about how we've done the electrical in this section is that even though we have like a side-by-side receptacles, each one of those side-by-sides is its own 20 amp breaker. If we wanted to plug in 5 and 5, it's no big deal for that outlet to handle that. I think that sometimes when we're working with electricians, when you tell them, I want an insane number of breakers, they're like, why do you need so many breakers? And I say, it's for LED lighting. And I think that like immediately their brain goes to, but LEDs don't take up any electricity. We don't need to do any of this. Yeah, you do. Because if you're keeping score, 50 radions, they pull about 200 watts a piece. It's a ton of electricity that you need. So anyway, we have tons of breakers now up top. And luckily they're all labeled, so we know that we're not putting in too many devices. A lot of that is going to be consolidated up in these floating canopies above. Moving on to our old systems, our original 2 systems. These trays with this equipment was sitting over top of the sump. And the idea was, it's space conserving. All your inputs and stuff can just come up from the bottom in the sump. It would be a pretty elegant solution to all this. And these things can slide and move. All this stuff can be taken on and off pretty easily. If there's a leak, it goes back into the sump. No problem, right? It turns out there were a couple of problems. Number one, the skimmer pump is currently off. It's loud. And even though all this stuff is sitting on vibration dampeners and everything like that, the vibration from the skimmer touching this tray, then touching the sump, it really made for this huge like resonance chamber that's like this 4x8 speaker essentially. And me being completely nuts about sound, yeah, I did not want that. So by isolating it onto its own aluminum stand with kind of like vibration isolating feet and everything like that, it's dramatically cut down on the noise. So yay. Also, in practice, having this stuff over the sump made maintenance in the sump super difficult. Now, we're not in our sump all the time scrubbing and cleaning. We're just not. But the time that you do want to go get in there and scrub and clean, it's a bit of a problem. So it's nice that we have this wide open sump array that we're able to maintain the way that we like to very, very easily. The other thing is, we actually got a gift from a number of companies. I want to just give a shout out to each of those guys in turn. So first of all, this is a long time ago, but Adaptive Reef had sent us this organizing cabinet. For the longest time, I was trying to figure out just a way to incorporate it into like what we do. And we tried it in a number of spots, both at the greenhouse and with Becca's tank at one point, and then here, and we just couldn't find like a good spot for it because it's a very general wire management solution, and we have like such specific things. There just wasn't a great fit until we came to this particular setup, because previously this aluminum stand and all this stuff just wasn't here. But we were able to mount it into the back of this, and we were able to then attach some of the control systems and things of that sort. So real quick, thank you to Adaptive Reef. Secondly, we had a visit from a Neptune rep, and we are not new to Neptune. We've used Neptune for years out at the greenhouse, but we haven't upgraded our super old original Apexes to the newer stuff, and we have not gotten to play with the Neptune Trident system. Up to this point, we've worked with Alcatronics, we've worked with GHL, and now this is the third alkalinity type monitoring system. I realize that this also does calcium and magnesium too. We're a little bit overwhelmed right now when it comes to working with these automated testers. We definitely don't have a favorite of any kind. I just don't know how to use them all yet. And having 3 on site is a little overwhelming. So I think at some point we're just gonna have to sit down as a staff and like really get comfortable and just figure out for ourselves in our workflow which one works the best for us. But thank you very much to, I guess, like both GHL and Neptune for giving us a demo to try out. Also, I had a conversation with the guys at Ozotech, and this is an ozone generator unit, and we have not hooked this up yet. Okay, I feel bad about this. So Steve Christensen, thank you very much for giving us a demo for this. I've been wanting to experiment with ozone forever, but I was like super scared to. I know it's basically an alternative to carbon, which makes sense on bigger scale projects. Public aquariums use it a lot. I guess bigger coral farms would use it. But to incorporate a new technology is always, you're asking a lot when it comes to one of our systems, because it's like, okay, well, there might be a big number of corals at risk if something goes wrong. And even if the technology has been like deemed safe forever, it's always in the back of my head, what if something goes wrong? But anyway, I had a nice long conversation with those guys, and I felt comfortable enough to give this a try. Now, there's a reason why these aren't running just yet, and let's get into that. One of the problems that we've had here for a long time was humidity. Now, I'm gonna get into some HVAC topics a little bit later, but long story short on that, we have very high levels of humidity. We have what amounts to an indoor swimming pool here, and we also want to make the space an office and a studio in the same place that you have an indoor swimming pool. It's kind of a tough task. So along the way, I've been trying a number of different things to kind of get our humidity under control. A bad humidity day here would have been, in the past, about 85% relative humidity. It's a bog. We eventually invested in some HVAC type products, things like air conditioners and dehumidifiers and stuff like that. So now a bad humidity day is like 55% relative humidity. So it's very much under control now. That was the main thing as to why we didn't plug in this ozone system. Because ozone generators, they don't like humidity. The way that you make ozone is with this unit, it's a corona discharge. So you're sending like electricity across and it basically like breaks up oxygen molecules and they recombine into O3. So it goes from O2 to O3, and O3 is this highly reactive ozone, and that's what you're looking for. But ambient air is just not all 100% oxygen, right? It's mostly nitrogen. When you shoot electricity through air, that nitrogen starts to react. From what I understand, it makes like this dirty byproduct that makes the entire thing just gunked up over time. And that happens in the presence of more humidity. So like the humidity plus the nitrogen plus electricity equals gunk, I guess. Until we got our humidity issues resolved, I didn't really feel like plugging this thing in. But what you could also do is run an air dryer. And so that's what this guy here is supposed to do. Now, again, not hooked up yet, but it has, this is a dual chambered one. It's full of a desiccant. And what this will do is it'll run the air through the desiccant, and that'll basically soak up all the humidity that's still remaining. Because we're at about 45, 50% relative humidity, it'll suck up all of this. Now, once this guy is pretty much spent, it'll switch to the other side, and then the original one, this is kind of like an oven, so you caution hot. It'll basically kick on this oven unit and it'll evaporate all the water that got soaked up on this side while the unit is drying the air with the other. So it flips back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So you always get dry air being sucked into your ozone generator. So I did mention the HVAC stuff. We have an air conditioner unit here, wonderful in the summertime, but there are a couple of issues. Now, when it was originally installed, it was just a standing unit by itself, nothing around. It didn't have any ductwork really at all. It just sucked in like the hot air at the very, very top and then blew out cold air at the bottom. Pretty simple. We decided to build a utility closet around it, and therefore it got a little bit of ductwork where it would take again, the hot air from some upper locations, and it would expel a lot of that right up from the bottom. The problem with that is that the air velocity coming out of just those bottom outputs was pretty aggressive. So not ideal. And me being a total psycho about sound, I want to do something about that. But the other thing is, it was abundantly clear that come summertime, this air conditioner is 100% necessary. If it's over 90-something degrees outside for a solid week, this place is not going to function without an air conditioner. Simply will not. I wanted to tackle this twofold problem: my psycho fixation on sound, and also having a complete redundant backup system. What we came up with was to, instead of having the air intakes up above, we would basically flip the unit. So the air intakes would suck in from the bottom of the air conditioner, go up into the attic space. It's not like a finished attic or anything like that, but it's roomy up there. It's just full of insulation and stuff. And we're gonna create like a duct system, like a 20-inch main insulated duct. We're going with, I think, like an R8 insulated duct. So like it'll be like a metal profile with about, I think, 3 or 6 inches of a bat sleeve around the whole thing. And those would spider out into 10-inch insulated solid duct. And we would have 10 outputs for the air conditioning coming out into the main space. So it'll be a lot more evenly distributed, and all that travel will also help soak up a lot of that sound and vibration. Theoretically, the entire system will get a lot quieter. Just in case it's not, I'm also putting some investment into these guys here. These are duct silencers. There's going to be, 10 outputs. There's 10 silencers. And these guys, I don't know if you could hear that on my mic, but it is pretty cool. Pretty cool. I'm excited about that. Now, the redundant thing, I described this central duct system that's going to be up in our attic. I wanted to tie in a second three-phase air conditioner as well. We have our main air conditioner that will run. And on the super hot days, maybe the auxiliary air conditioner will also blow into that same system. If this guy here, for some reason, goes down for any reason, the other one can pick up the slack for the entire building. That is very reassuring because pre-pandemic, I was thinking, well, it would really suck if there was like some delay in having a repair guy come out and fix this or whatever needs to happen. Some part needs to get swapped out. But now that we've lived in pandemic life for like a little while, it's like, you know what? There's no guarantee that this part is even going to be around. Like it could be 6 months. 6 months without cooling, that's going to be a problem. I mean, even if you were in the tail end of winter and then you're getting into summer now, it's going to be a problem. Having like a complete redundant system for something that's mission critical like this, it's becoming a no-brainer. The idea is by the end of this month, we will have all of this stuff installed. All right, guys, that pretty much does it for this update. I'd say so far so good. Hopefully we'll get all those systems that you saw downstairs up and running relatively soon. But I know that's not going to happen. It's going to be months, let's be real. We have all of the plumbing stuff that we need, I think. It's just going to come down to the availability of the plumber. The custom sump is commissioned. There's a lot of, there's a lot of juggling involved. It'll be interesting. Personally, I'm just glad that the tanks are here. It's always I think that's the hardest part. And so once like the hardest obstacle is already taken care of, the rest of it, it happens when it happens. But anyway, that is all. Hope you guys enjoyed the update. I'll see y'all next time. Happy reefing.